This week on the Walk On podcast, being willing to pick your head up and look for the opportunity is the hard work, right? To know, hey, I'm in a bad place, but if I don't look for a road out of here, I'm going to be stuck here.
For me, it was like I just relied on myself. Like I had to get up and I had to move forward. I had young kids, I had a wife, and she worked, and that all helped. But the one thing that I've relied on today is I've always said I'm not the smartest guy in the room. And I think that's okay to admit, because if you think you're the smartest person in the room, that's a whole other conversation. But I've listened to my share of podcasts that help you with these things, right? There's a lot of really good podcasts like this one. You know what I mean? Just listening to people that you're not alone. People are going to get kneecapped in their careers one way or another. And just be ready for it or know how to move on from there.
Hello and welcome to the Walk On podcast. This is season 5. We are rapidly accumulating episodes, and it's because you keep listening and because I'm able to get great guests like we have today. If you are new here, welcome. The Walk On podcast really is about people's journeys to fulfillment in the work world or through their service. And it started for me a couple years ago as I was trying to figure out, what do I want to do next? I've been a public affairs professional, owned my own firm for the last 11 years, been in the industry almost 30, which pains me to say. But, really wanted to figure out, how do I maximize my time moving forward? And that led me to conversations with people like our guest today, Paul Leone from the New York Brewers Association. And if you aren't new here, thanks for coming back. And I think this will really be an interesting conversations. We've talked about people's passions, and what we haven't done a lot, we have in some instances, is talk about how that can be messy sometimes, how that can be hard. And I think our guest today, and I'll do a little sharing, but we'll dive into a little bit of that. So formally introducing our guest who's here with us today, Paul Leone is the executive director of the New York State Brewers Association, actually became the first formal leader of the organization in 2013 and has grown the organization with this rapidly growing industry in our state. Prior to that, had a number of noteworthy roles, which I'm sure we'll talk about. I was drawn to the one where he launched Beer America TV, which brought the industry to life via online episodes. And just a bit of a side note, one of his partners in the project was the brewmaster at Moon River Brewing Company in Savannah, which is one of my favorite George breweries. As Paul, I told him, I lived there for about 18 years and got down to Savannah quite a bit. So with my introduction there and connectivity to the beer world and just really admiring what you're doing, Paul, I'll welcome you on.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks for having me. And thanks for reaching out. I really like what you're doing as well with these podcasts. And so I'm particularly feel honored that you'd reach out to me.
Well, appreciate it and glad you're here. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about your background?
Boy, my background on paper, basically this is like my third career. You graduate from college and you're going to do all of these great things. And those great things weren't really turning out as you envision when you're in school. But, I started my career at the Baseball Hall of Fame and working in baseball, and then went from there to being a television producer and editor and videographer for a number of years. And now I'm running the New York State Brewers Association. And so when everybody looks at my resume and they go, wow, that looks like it was incredible. And it's like, it has been incredible, but it's not as pretty as it is on paper. But I'm honored to have all three of those careers, and they all sort of tie together one way or another.
So let's start there. Where for you, how do they tie together? How does that come to life for you?
It's just sort of one led to another, right? I think in life, especially these days, nobody stays with a job anymore for 30 years, gets retirement. I shouldn't say nobody, rarely, very few people, can stay with a company. You move around a lot and you look for opportunity for what drives you. And I was super lucky to get the job at the Baseball Hall of Fame. I had actually had some connections there. My roommate was from Cooperstown, and I just happened to land there in 1993, which was a gift within itself to work during that period of time in the 90s, like, not to sidetrack too much, but that's when Ted Williams would go there, and all of these guys, Stan Musial and Yogi Berra, and they were all still alive. They were older men, but boy, to be in their presence back in the 90s was pretty great. And then I spent some time in Cooperstown in 6 years, which is really, you say you love Savannah. Cooperstown is my happy place. If nobody's ever been there, it is small town USA, the same, and it's just a magical place to be. And then, I wanted to kind of, was a young man, and I wanted to kind of, find out what else was out in the world. And I found this job for this brand new TV show called Home and Garden Television, which nobody had ever networked. And so I took a jump and moved to Washington. And then, this getting on that train of doing national series and things is something that I just did for 15 years after that, doing a bunch of different shows, moving around a lot of places, a couple of layoffs in between. And then I just, got to a point in my life and career where I'm jumping around a lot here, where I just wanted to do something that made me happy every day. And beer was it. And I just happened to land the mother of all jobs, through a lot of connections and things.
Boy, as you just said, and beer made me happy, I was sort of thinking of, Ben Franklin or Homer Simpson, just the most simple, the simple things in life make us happy. I'd love to go back. Thanks for sharing that journey. I'd love to go back because, I sort of, as I look at my career, my dad used to joke I couldn't keep a job, but my resume, right? It's you follow these opportunities. And, I remember making some decisions that I was like, why did I just do that? Because that came with a cost. Like I was running public affairs across the Southeast for Walmart, got bit by the bug of wanting to run for office, wanting to launch my own firm. And it was 2008. And then the economy fell out.
Wasn't it for both of us?
Yeah.
And
great year. So that's that, that moment of I made this decision. I was following a passion. I was following an idea, but then it was like I was the dog that caught the bumper. And I'm like, oh no, real world caught up to me. So talk a little bit about those experiences and what you take away from those hard choices that bring hard things along with them.
I think, your experience and my experience are pretty similar. I think, I think no matter if you're a younger person, like, as I get older and I'm in my 50s now, and I think about, my younger self, and we all have a vision of where we want to be and what we think the way things should go. But what we can't plan for is 2008. You and I said that, like I said, what a magical year with great sarcasm. No matter what you were doing, the economy fell out from everybody, and a lot of people lost their jobs. And so, you're helpless. You just hit these roadblocks in life that you didn't account for. I would say, for probably a lot of folks listening to this as well, COVID is another great example of that. Nobody could have predicted that, and people lost jobs and things. So I think that, you have to adapt. Like, I always, I'm a pure Gen Xer. We grew up in a way where if you fell down and you hurt yourself, you get up and you rub some dirt on it and you keep moving. And
right.
And I know that, like, generationally, that doesn't apply to everyone. We didn't have technology, early on and things. And so the way we grew up was a little bit different than the way the modern generation. So I'm not saying, like, hey, just rub some dirt on it and it's all going to be okay. But what you learn is learning to fail. Everybody's going to fail. You're going to hit roadblocks. How do you get up from that? How do you get around that? How do you move on from that? And, you have to, like, if you don't do it, then you're not going to get to where you want to be ultimately. Right. Yeah. And so that's just kind of how I grew up and moved forward. And I'm sure, like you, we have some bumps and bruises and scars that you don't see on top, but it also propelled us to where we are today.
Yeah. I appreciate that. And I think that's really the challenge and the opportunity, right? It's you have to you can't avoid living in whatever that roadblock creates, right? That's just the reality. But being willing to pick your head up and look for the opportunity is the hard work, right? To know, hey, I'm in a bad place, but if I don't look for a road out of here, I'm going to be stuck here.
Yeah, I would think too, what also helps, and you're right. I mean, for me, it was like, I just relied on myself. Like, I had to get up and I had to move forward. I had young kids, I had a wife, and she worked, and that all helped. But, I do think that the one thing that I've relied on today for folks that might be of younger generations, and even our generation or my generation, your generation, is, once in a while, and I catch myself doing it too, because I certainly I've always said I'm not the smartest guy in the room, always. And I think that's okay to admit, because if you think you're the smartest person in the room, that's a whole other conversation. And we've all met those people. But, I would say, I've listened to my share of podcasts that help you with these things, right? There's a lot of really good podcasts like this one, you know what
Yeah.
I mean? Just
Yeah.
listening to people that you're not alone when,
Yeah.
and people are going to get kneecapped, in their careers one way
Yeah.
or another, and then just be ready for it or know how to
Yeah.
move on from there.
Yeah, I love, there are a lot of things in there that really resonated with me, but one, realizing you're not alone. You're not the first person that's been laid off. You're not the only person that the bottom fell out of the economy, right? And then you have to take inventory of yourself, and you said rely on yourself. It's, but as we're sort of, so I agree with that. As we're sort of getting into this, though, you had talked about your ability to really build relationships and how those have propelled you in a lot of these areas. So I suspect in these times of trouble, those relationships can really benefit you.
So yeah, when I 2008, so when I was working on this great TV series and living in Savannah, Georgia, and I thought it was going to be great. It was one of my favorite jobs, one of my favorite cities. And craft beer has always been a passion of mine. It's mostly because of the people. And so, when I lost my job, I this was 2008. I'm like, what I don't find on the internet is video podcasting, like just video. There were plenty of audio podcasts, but it's like I'm a
Yep.
video guy, so this is what I know how to do. And so I created my own opportunity. It's like, well, what do I do here? And so I went and I literally walked up to the guy that owns Moon River Brewing Company who didn't know me at all. And he was there. And I said, hey, you want to do a podcast? And he's like, what is that? And I said, well, we'll do stuff on video and we'll do it on YouTube. And it was really kind of early days. What I didn't have the knowledge is like, I felt like we were influencers before that was a thing. I didn't know how to
Yeah.
monetize it. It didn't matter. I was doing something that I loved. And so that started creating opportunity, right? I would shoot a bunch of podcasts during the week, made me happy hanging out there and talking about beer. And then just by doing that, the producers of Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives saw it and wanted to know if we wanted to shoot a TV pilot. We ended up shooting 4 TV pilots with different people. Nothing
Wow.
ever got picked up, but opportunity kept happening. And as we were
Yeah.
doing TV pilots, I spent time with the guys at Oscar Blues out in Colorado. And the joy that they had going to work every day and just that they loved their job. The early days of craft beer were just heaven. Like people were just loving going to work every day. And I just said to myself, I want to be them. That's what I want. Like I didn't, money didn't matter and money mattered, but it wasn't like I want to get this next job. And so I guess one opportunity led to another. You have to go into everything with your eyes open, and creating relationships along the way has been critical to every step that I've taken.
Yeah, agreed and similar for me. But I love what you said too. And I'll when I mentor or counsel younger people in the workforce, one of the things I say is, yes, I understand you're focused on money and a title and vacation time, and all those things are important. You have a job to do, and so just go in every day, do the work, put a foot in front of the other. And when you look up in 6 months and see where you've come and the work you've done and the relationships you've built. So when you talked about just interviewing people and that created new opportunities, it is doing that work. It is showing up and being invested that creates the opportunity. It is that flywheel that gets things going for you.
Yeah, and I've taught my kids, I don't care what any of you do for a living. I just want you to be happy going to work every day. And I've said this a lot to people. I have friends that make a lot more money than me, but they're not happy. Like they're just making a lot of money, and it's great. They might have a bigger house, they might have boats, they might have 2 houses, all of those things. But what I discovered with the beer job was, I just wanted to get a job that made me happy and make enough money to be happy every day. And what that turned out being is that I was so passionate and in love with what I was doing every day, the money came. You know what I mean? Like when you have bosses and you go to work with passion every day and you love what you do every day and you work hard, the time off comes. Like the money comes, like, because, especially if you're an employee, what kind of employee would you like, Michael? Would you like somebody that comes to work every day and loves their job every day? Yes. And you're going to keep that person no matter what, and you're going to make sure they stay, right?
Yep. Yeah. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. How you show up is so much of everything in our life. I was curious as you were talking, thinking like you found this thing that, every day you love doing, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Think back to what would you that was, sort of struggling 2008, fallen into this, production podcast opportunity, what would that version of you think of you looking forward to, looking to you today? What would they think of where you've landed?
Well, I just wish I knew I was going to end up here. Like I didn't know, I didn't know what was
Yeah.
coming next. All I know is that I had to keep my head down. Like when I interviewed for this job, we were living in Texas, and I was on the verge of, I got laid off again, working for, a grifter down in Texas but I was looking for opportunity and it wasn't there. And so my wife and I moved back to New York with no jobs, 3 kids, and just said, you know what, we've got to make something else of our lives. And I would say there was a bit of depression going on at that point with me. I'm struggling. I didn't know where I was going to go next. And then I read this really awesome quote. And I don't know, like, I do believe in fate. I'm one of those guys because I'm always looking for things. And as I was interviewing for this job and not feeling the best about myself and putting a happy face on, but really just struggling with a lot of other things personally, I read this really great quote that said, if you believe in your dreams, they may come true. If you believe in yourself, they will come true. And I just saw that, and there's just like something clicked in me, and it's like, yeah, everybody has this dream, but like, it's really up to you. Believe in yourself. And back then I'm just like, I know I can do this. And I just went for it. Like, it wasn't like nobody's getting this but me. It changed everything in me.
I love that quote and love that perspective. And going back to where you were, though, I think that's where I was when I was starting this podcast. I love the people that I work with, my clients, but it wasn't fulfilling. And then you have the struggle of, I've referenced this before, and I've had this person on the podcast, but similar field. She had a PR firm. I've had a PR firm. Now I do more solo consulting work. But her firm was booming, and we were commiserating over, and I wasn't, and we were commiserating over drinks. And she's like, Michael, you hate going into the office every day right now, and I love it. And that's the difference. I find joy in the work. I find joy in the people. And I think that's where I was with this podcast. It was like, what do I want to do that fills me up so that I am showing up who I want to be? And so when you're betting on yourself, when you're saying, this is an opportunity that I see what it can be for me, and I'm all in. I think being able to pull yourself up out of where you were, that takes a lot of confidence in yourself. And I don't know what else that it was for you that clicked besides seeing that quote, but getting yourself from where you were to where you are is pretty powerful.
Yeah. I mean, and you felt that, right? I mean, it's like easier said than done, right? In hindsight, but it's, you have no other choice. Like, right. What was your other choice? You're going to keep going to work every day and not being fulfilled and happy. And I mean, so I guess you just have to kind of sit back and, hopefully you have sounding boards too. It's tough. I'm sure you had sounding boards, right? And people to talk to. That really helps as well. Like I said, don't be the smartest person in the room, because it doesn't exist. Talk to people and use your relationships, because all of that matters.
Yeah. Ask for help and guidance. And I think that's a challenge. I've been getting a lot of incoming lately via Instagram and, news and the podcasts I follow, where they're talking about particularly, men who are in a leadership position in their life and other things. Don't ask for help. And there's this silent suffering going on that, the pressure to live a certain life, pressure to meet financial responsibilities, and the pressure just to be happy. And so instead of reaching out and saying, hey, what would you do with this opportunity? How do I get there? Or I'm just struggling, let's grab a beer and, just talk. I think we're not equipped as well as we could be to do that.
No, and I'm not a natural leader. I've always been a worker. I enjoy working for people. And it's strange. Like, I've always worked better with women. When I've had women bosses, I've just adored those bosses the most. And I don't know what it is about that, but I just enjoy my women bosses more than the men bosses. But, as a side, when I got this leadership role, and, we're the second largest number of breweries in the country. It's a big job. But I made sure that as I started to grow, I started out 3 years just by myself with this job. And then the industry just kept growing. There were 135 breweries when I started this job, and I didn't know what I was doing. I've never been an executive director of anything, and we had no money, but I know I loved this. And I had some help on the board, at the early board, just like helping me, like, well, we need to do this, this, and this. And I figured it out. And then when I had the opportunity to hire employees, the one thing that that it stuck in my head. And I go back to not being the smartest person in the room. And the reason why I say that is I wanted to make sure I hired people that were smarter than me. I didn't want to tell people what to do. I wanted to hire people that would tell me what I needed to do. And so I think that was really helpful because I hired people that were smarter to me. I do not have to know everything about marketing. I do not have to know, I'm not a sponsorship director. I knew how to do events and things. So why would I be the smartest guy in the room and tell really smart people, oh, this is where things have to be done? It just didn't make sense. Yeah. And this is kind of how I lead.
Well, we'll pivot in a second to the current role because you just opened that door. But I want to go back to what you said. I've had a couple women bosses and managers, and for me, the difference in experience was their willingness to trust me to do the right thing and not feeling like they had to direct and guide me, and also just more, they poured into me, right? There was more empowerment, there was more nurturing, there was more focus on me as a person. And that's what I've really tried to do as a leader. And I think in the organizations that I'm most successful, it's where my job isn't to tell you how to do your job. It's to try and clear roadblocks and make you a more empowered and whole person. And to me, that's the success of leadership, I think.
Agreed. You nailed it. Yep, for sure.
Yeah. Well, so let's talk about that role. And I really appreciate it. I don't want to give short shrift to that conversation, but as you and I talked about, I try to do a number of things in these podcasts. One is to have that human perspective. Mm-hmm. How are we finding passion? How are we managing struggles? But also, let's talk a little bit about that thing that you're passionate about and the industry that you're in. So you are, head of one of the largest associations for beer industries in America from the state level. So talk about that role. What's going on in New York and in craft beverages?
Boy. So, to make a long story short, it was sort of, when they hired me, the craft beer industry in 2013 was really starting to explode. Like it just was, craft beer really was kind of starting to find itself. And at one point, a few years, after I was hired, we were opening a brewery every 8 days in New York. So, it was a volunteer, like most associations, volunteer board. They couldn't do it anymore. So they hired me. California had an executive director at the time, Washington, but it was really a new role. Now most states have an executive director of the State Brewers Association. And so, I really didn't know. All I knew is that I love beer and I knew that I wanted this job. But a funny aside that I wanted to share about how I got this job, as a guy that was a TV guy, it's like, how do you become executive director of the Brewers Association? It goes back to those relationships. And so what I did when I found out about this job, and this could be universal. The reason why I share this story, because anybody can do this, and I highly recommend it. But it took me being older to kind of figure it out. My younger self would have never figured this out. That I found a job that I really wanted. Well, to me, it was the mother of all jobs. Like at that point, I was actually selling T-shirts at the Genesee Brew House gift shop because I wanted to work in beer so bad. And so at the time, I found out who the hiring person was. And then I actually stalked him a little bit and went to a brewers conference and found him and did an escalator pitch. I literally chased him up the escalator and gave him a pitch about who I was and why. And then I found out like what he liked and what he didn't like. And I found out a lot of things about him. And so I found out one of his favorite people in the whole world was the guy that owned Dogfish Head Craft Brewery, Sam Calagione. I happened to know Sam because of my previous career, right. Was things. And so I had Sam write me a letter of recommendation that appeared out of the blue. And he called me. He's like, do you know who just sent me a letter? I'm like, who? He goes, Sam Calagione. I go, get out of here. Really? Oh, that guy. So in other words, what I was doing was I was really politicking. I wasn't being, dishonest in any way. I was working hard. This is a job I wanted. I wasn't just going to send a resume and wait for a phone call. I was going to make it happen one way or another. And I only share that story because I feel like anybody wants a job bad enough, do some homework. Find out. I mean, I'm sure you have stories like this, right? Yeah. Like just, try to do a little bit more because there's going to be a lot of people that want that job. What's going to make you stand out? And that's how I ended up landing this miracle of a job. It's not even a job. I think for the first time in my life, I've never said on Sunday, oh, tomorrow's Monday. Never. And it has its challenges like anything else.
Sure. Of course.
It's a job that's grown into a beast. I have a real budget now. I have staff now. mean, that's a whole other podcast, like having staff.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the same with you, right?
Yeah.
It's a whole thing. But
Yes.
anyway,
Yes.
yeah. So here we are. I'm 12 years into this, and it's grown to this thing. And the New York State brewing industry is stable right now. Stable is the new growth. Breweries are closing for the first time. It probably not really outpacing openings, but I had two breweries close in the last few weeks, and I've had 4 people reach out to me saying they're going to open a brewery. So that's just kind of where we are as an industry.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm a bit of a different sector, but, I was looking at, the massive investment that Black Button Distilling made, and all of a sudden they've closed doors shortly thereafter. So there is this. So what is driving some of that closing? Is it saturation of market? Is it economic costs of cans and stuff coming into it, changing tastes? Where are we?
Yeah, it's a combination of a lot of things. I would say, generationally, Gen Zers aren't really, the early Gen Zers aren't really drinking. Plus the choice. I mean, if you think about it, we have like alcoholic Dr. Pepper now, right? We have THC infused beverages.
Yeah.
Like, there are so many options out there. But, drinking habits have changed a little bit. And I think that with some of these places that are closing, and I'm not saying that Black Button, ran into this issue, but they grew pretty fast. And there are some places that have debts and things, like businesses, any business with debt on an industry that's not growing anymore, that's going to provide a whole new challenge. And, you're just seeing some of the larger players having a little bit more challenge than in the past. And you're also seeing a level of burnout with some of these breweries. It's not a high profit business. These little breweries are not printing money. You see the average consumer will go, oh my gosh, it's $22 for a 4-pack. I can tell you that brewery is probably making $4 on that 4-pack. There's a lot of cost that goes into these things. So they're not making $22 for their 4-pack. So the profitability isn't really big either. You got to be passionate about it. So that's kind of the industry is kind of where we're at right now.
Yeah. And I get the sense, since we're both in the Finger Lakes, from the data, it looks like the Finger Lakes is a little maybe above the mean for the New York State industry. Is that correct? Like we tend to be a little healthier, more robust?
In the good months, yes. So that's that's the challenge with those that are right on the lake, and those that are in the tourist areas. Yeah, it's booming right now. But January, February, March, they're scraping by. And so. Boy, the Finger Lakes is what a great area to go visit. Wineries, breweries, cideries, the whole deal, distilleries. But everybody has their challenges. There really isn't oversaturation. I've never bought into that, and some people listening to this might think it's crazy. But a lot of folks, you go to a region, I know in Rochester where I am, there's like 8 breweries that you can walk to. That's great. People don't go to just one brewery. They like to go to as many as they can, especially from a tourism perspective. They want to hit as many as they can.
Yeah. So from that perspective, I'm curious, in the Finger Lakes, in the wine industry, collaboration and community is really important among the growers and producers. Does that translate in craft beer as well? Do you see that, or yes?
It's a community. They don't see each other as competitors at all. The craft brewing industry, I'm a part of this email group, and it's like, hey, I need these hops, or I need this, and I've fallen short, or hey, my canning machine broke and I need this part. And immediately people are like, here, I've got this for you. I've got this for you. How can I help you? That sort of thing. So the collaboration and the community, and I would say that for all craft beverage is something that's unique about the industry, is that they all kind of work together and root for each other.
And what's your educated perspective on why that is, when so many other industries it's more cutthroat?
I think it goes back to what I said earlier, where people will go to, if you like in the Finger Lakes, people go down, they travel, they might hit 2 or 3 breweries and a winery, right? And so you're competing, but not really competing in a lot of ways. Those distribution breweries probably see themselves as a little bit more competitors, because now they're looking at shelf space and tap handle space and that sort of thing. But the vast majority of breweries just sell out of their tap room, and are really just trying to make the best beer they can, provide events, provide customer service, and all of those things, and people will come.
Yeah. What's the biggest opportunity looking at the industry in New York State moving forward?
The opportunity for being in the brewing industry, Uh,
Yeah.
well, I mean, right now they're all they're all at a point now where they need to adapt to the new reality of where we are. So it used to be, you just make beer and you're a brewery and you come in and you have your pretzels and then you drink beer. And now they've got to have food. They have to have, substantial food. People want to eat when they go to a brewery. A lot down in the Finger Lakes region, they allow dogs. They allow, kids are allowed. Breweries aren't bars. They're more social oriented places. They have to offer, trivia nights and book clubs and all of those fun things to get people there. They have to have event space for some of these spaces. So breweries are really at a point now where they need to, the opportunity is there. If they adapt, they'll be fine. They'll get through this.
Well, that's good to hear. So as we sort of come towards the end of this, a couple last questions. And one is, and I want to get your perspective personally, but would love to get your take on this. So you talk with a lot of business owners, and many of them went from home brewer or dreamer of launching a brewery to now they've got a brick and mortar business. What was the thread that you see that emerged that was like, yeah, this is more than a hobby for me. I want to take this thing I love and give it a go at a business. What is that sort of is the thread there?
Well, it's passion. This is, these folks, I would say a good majority of them probably were home brewers beforehand, but it's an industry that they love. And what's really unique about the brewing industry too, and I sort of touched on it earlier, is the people. The people in the brewing industry are as pure and as nice and as collaborative. And it's just, you're happy every day. It's hard work to run a brewery, really hard work. But the people that come in and the relationships and the passion behind it, like I said, none of them are printing money, but they love what they do every day. It makes them happy. And so passion is the common thread for this industry, particularly.
Yeah, I love that. And I think you know this, but I, used to have this platform, Destination FLX, that was all about promoting the Finger Lakes.
Right.
And so I got to go to breweries, wineries, and just interview and talk to. And so one of the things that comes through for me, in addition to what you said, is I've marveled at, particularly brewers, there's an ingenuity to them, right? Like there's a problem. First of all, we're going to solve a beer recipe, right? I want to, let's throw some Reese's peanut butter puffs in there and see what that does for it or whatever, right? There's an ingenuity, but also on the business side. And there's a problem that comes up today. Well, I'm just going to get a wrench and fix it, or we're going to build our own bar in here. So I sense, and maybe it's wrong and you can correct me here, but I do sense there's this sense of there's nothing we can't solve. We're open to the challenge and we're going to go at it.
You just nailed it. Like, hey, and a whole part that I missed in all of this, you just nailed it. What I forget to tell people, like, brewing beer is not, they just don't make beer. It's like being a chef, right? Like you just nailed it. Like you go to a brewery, it's hard to brew good beer. But not only that, but it's like, what can we do with this beer? What can we do to make this beer a little bit, there's a lot of creativity behind it. And I would tell you that a lot of the brewers, and I would put, winery owners and everybody else, a lot of them build out their own spaces. Like, a lot of them are their own engineers. They can't afford to hire the electricians and the carpenters and all of those things. A lot of those spaces have been built by their own hands because they have to be, and they don't have the budgets for them. That kind of thing. So they're much more than they are like, hey, I'm just going to go in and grab a beer and it's the owner and they're making beer and all of those sort of things. It's a multi-layered business that takes a huge amount of creativity. I think the biggest challenge is, and I hesitate to say this out loud, but I do mean it with all the love in my heart, is there are a lot of good breweries out there, a lot of good people making great beer, but there are a lot of folks that could just make great beer and sell beer and that would be enough. But you have to know how to be a business owner as well. And I'm sure and so the not so sexy part of owning a brewery is dealing with the state liquor authority and dealing with the TTB and dealing with the insurance and dealing with the legal and dealing with the landlord and dealing with, all of those what you don't see is with the amount of hours they spend in the background. And by the way, cleaning is probably, they clean more than they brew because, you brew beer, but the brewery has to be spotless and clean or the beer is going to be bad kind of thing. So, on the surface, there's that funny little, image of people like, yeah, you just make beer and you drink beer and you're happy all day. And it's like, that's probably about 10% of what they do all day.
Yeah. And I think that's translatable to any business, right?
Right.
You could be an artist and create great music or, paintings. But how do you create a gallery out of that? How do you take that to market? How do you deal with all the other stuff that comes with it? You're protecting your IP, all that stuff. I think that's translatable. Just,
Well, you said it earlier in your own business, right? Like you were
yeah,
hated going into the office every day. And
yeah,
you were dealing with multi-layered worth of things. You were doing something that you were passionate about, but wasn't really clicking. You didn't want to go into the office,
yep. Yeah, no, and I think of my friends. We used to live in Pittsford, and I'm a Hobart grad, and Casey over at Lock 32, Hobart grad. So I got to know them a little bit. But I remember when they expanded and they're like, well, we're going to shut down for a weekend because we're literally going to be here all weekend building a bar. Right. And and we'll figure it out. We're going to, and we'll see on Tuesday. Right. I mean, it is that willingness. And I think passion, you wouldn't work that hard though if you weren't that passionate about it. Right.
Right.
Like you wouldn't do that kind of work. Well, let me, as we get
Hey,
to
who else is a Hobart grad?
Who's that?
Fred Matt, FX Matt Brewing Company, 4th generation Matt family.
Yes.
The oldest family-run brewery in the state, second oldest in the country, by the way, behind Yuengling.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Yuengling still has them by a few years. But yeah, Matt is still running the FX Matt Brewing Company in Utica, and he's a Hobart grad.
Yes, and I don't know if they still do, but for reunion every year they used to come up and have a tent and sell beer. So, well, I appreciate your time today. Let's ask one more question. So we talked about these industries, but what advice do you have? And we've done a lot of it, but what advice would you give someone who's listening today for figuring out how to follow their passion or to get up from when they're down? What do you direct that way?
I would always say, get out of your own head if it's possible. I spent a lot of time worrying about stuff that I didn't have control over, and but now my older self, I realize how much time I wasted worrying about stuff that I didn't have control over. And I know that's easier said than done because I've been through it already. And when your younger self doesn't always understand that, if I keep pressing forward and keep believing in myself, I can get through this. Like I can get through anything, no matter how down you are. And everybody's going to hit those walls. Everybody. I don't know anybody that's like, if you don't fail and fall on your face once in a while, and if you don't lose your job and all of that, then I don't think you're ever going to get to where you want to be, because there's lessons in everything. And I know that sort of sounds like, oh yeah, I've heard that a million times before, but wouldn't you agree, Michael? I mean, you've been through so much yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I've failed more than I've succeeded. Right. And I often tell people life is a series of peaks and valleys. And if we didn't have the valleys, then the peaks would be meaningless.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, it is that willingness to fail and try. And I've probably mentioned this before on a podcast, but I have a 4-year-old who we've been trying to teach to ice skate. I played college hockey, and it's a big deal to me. And it was humbling and a reminder of how hard ice skating is.
Yeah.
But getting him comfortable with the mindset of he was terrified of falling. Yeah. And I was like, but that means you're trying. And now he knows, we say, and if you fall, what do you do? And he says, get up, right? It's just become second nature to him. Well, okay, I didn't hurt myself. Let's just get up because I have to. So, well, I think it's a great place to end it. I appreciate that advice. It's been a pleasure talking to you today.
It's been a pleasure talking to you, and kudos to you for this podcast, because I really, when you first reached out to me via email, I didn't know much about it. And then I started listening to them, and I really got a lot out of it. So it got me even more excited. So if for anybody listening to this, listen to the other ones as well. There's a lot of good info. You're doing good work here. So thank you for allowing me to be on your program.
I truly appreciate it. That means a lot. And thanks for all the work you do for the industry. It's creating jobs, it's creating happiness, it's drawing people to our state. Rochester is on the map in a way that it hasn't been in a long time because of the industry that you're supporting and leading. So thank you for that.
Well, lucky guy. Remember, believe in your dream, it may come true. Believe in yourself, and they will. I still live by that.
I love it. Well, this is the Walk On Podcast, people living with passion and purpose, providing a roadmap for your personal journey. Hear their stories, find your passion, walk on. Again, Paul, thanks for being on.
Thanks, Michael.
Next up on the Walk On Podcast. What are some of the key lessons you've taken from entrepreneurship and building out and helping these tech companies grow, and now where you are in the AI space?
Companies are aggregations of lots of things, capital and equipment and those kinds of things, but most importantly, by far, is people. And that's actually a pretty big theme. Is AI going to displace people, and how is it going to displace people? And I think, like all technological innovations, yes, it's going to displace people, and maybe significantly displace people. This is not a new issue, and it's significant and painful, every time it happens, and we shouldn't be flippant or glib about the real impact it has on people. But neither is progress going to stop, and the role of people inside the companies is going to change in ways, some of which maybe we can predict, most of which I would submit are not.
So you look at me, won't you look at